I'm going to review what I did with NIO, and then I'll throw back in ENS because basically for the last couple of weeks I looked at NIO and I decided that I was going to stick exclusively to NIO and only play NIO because I wanted to kind of make sure that the system that I'm using is a good system, that it sort of works at least. And basically, I decided to pick one ticker and stick with it because it's a lot easier than if you try to follow a whole bunch of different tickers. And basically, I had these things written out. I don't know why they keep disappearing on me. I believe I had them on SPY, but what I talked about was tech stuff and fundamentals. And in tech stuff, we looked at how to draw support and resistance lines, and there was the many touches versus the fibs, which were basically the way that I was drawing things. Oh, and then versus the swings. Those were the three ways that I draw support and resistance levels. And obviously, as you can tell by the graph behind me, it gets a little bit crowded. Then I tried to look at price patterns. And I believe in the case of NIO at that time, which was a couple of weeks ago, which was probably what, October 2nd, we did not find any relevant price patterns. No big deal. It's not mandatory. Okay, and then at the very as a very last, not as a very last resort, but the last thing that I add to kind of confirm whatever theory I do come up with support, resistance, and price patterns, and what we will look at in fundamentals, is that I would look at indicators, and in this case, I was using the Neptune trading system, which is from one of our X-Trades analysts, to kind of just confirm, because indicators are, for the most part, backward-looking indicators. They tell you what has happened, which obviously does not mean that it will continue in the future. So we just kind of add that later. And then as for fundamentals, we looked for ticker-specific news, which in this case for NIO we had deliveries and sales. We look for industry-specific, and we look for market general. So there's ENS messing around. Okay, so what we had was, oh, and sorry, but obviously trend. So we had a bearish trend for NIO overall, basically like most tickers since 2021. We had a bearish market sentiment overall. The market is looking pretty bad. There was a lot of bearish news about EVs in general, because there were supply chain issues, and also not just in terms of availability of materials, but also in terms of pricing of some of these materials. It was becoming quite a heated competition for the different EV players to get their battery materials and whatnot. And the only thing that was bullish, our only bullish catalyst, was NIO specific news that they had improved deliveries year over year, and that they were making this new marketing sales push into Europe, which is their second biggest market. It's not the U.S. After China, their biggest market is Europe, and so we started looking at the technicals. Bearish on the trend. We drew some support and resistance levels, looked at different ways of doing it, and we did not find any price patterns. And the indicator, I believe, was also bearish at that time. You guys can go ahead and look at this on the previous videos we had. In 3.1, I believe, is when I took the original NIO play, and we'll talk about why it was bullish. And in the second one, we talked about missed levels. In the third one, I threw in SunPower and ENS. but we basically looked behind and took another play on NIO, and this time it was puts. That SunPower, let me go ahead and move that. The SunPower play was also puts, and the ENS was the only one that was long. Okay, and this is going to be 3.4, where we're basically closing off the couple of weeks, and actually next week probably also stick to NIO. SunPower is out. That was just very specific news on a SunPower downgrade. Just telling you how some ticker specific news, such as upgrades and stuff, can affect a ticker and make it move in a different direction than the overall market. So this is what we looked at in that first video, and we went through these. Basically, we focused on this technical stuff, and we said, okay, everything is looking bearish, but we have this bullish news that is NIO specific, and we think that it's worth risking a play on this, because if we look at October, which is over here, remember this is the weekly, it was very bearish. We had 3 red weeks. Okay, the second week of September, the 3rd week of September. Goodness, ENS is going crazy. The 4th week, oh, actually that would be the beginning of the 4th week of September and half of the 1st week of October were all red. So we figured, okay, things are pretty oversold, and we do have ticker specific news. Let's go ahead and see if we can make a play out of this. So let me zoom into what we did. Remember that we had, before I start zooming in, we had this downtrending channel. Okay, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to leave that one in, but we didn't have this line drawn in. We had these two. It was a channel. It was a channel. Okay, and that was what we were focusing on when we moved into our 1 hour. Remember, the solid lines are anything above the daily time frame, and the dotted lines are the ones that I look at that show up as levels on the 4 or 1 hour or anything below the daily. So what did we have? We had NIO breaking back into this channel. Okay, very bearish news, very bearish reaction the past couple of days. Bearish here, broke into this channel. It actually broke below the 50 SMA here. And when we took the play, or the day before we took the play, we were here, and it had sort of, as you can see, obviously it does look like it did break down below, but very briefly, and then it immediately rocketed back up above this long-term 2-pixel support from a long time. I believe this is like from February or April, I believe. And it held. We were looking at the 1 hour, so let me go ahead and switch over to that time frame. And if I recall correctly, if not, you can go check me on the 3.1 video. This is what happened. It bounced here after hours, or sorry, this is after hours, this is pre-market hours. It bounced. I had a pretty strong bounce here, and we had decided that this was the day before. Okay, October 3rd was the day that we started looking at it, because it had bounced and it kind of broke down below that level again, but it wasn't really moving too far away from it. This is where we decided that if it did retake this level, then that would be our entry to go long. And obviously you could see that it opened quite positive. And I did not take this play on the mobile app, so you won't find it on my past trades. But I did take the next one, which was puts, which obviously also worked out. And the recap of this play was basically that it did rocket, or did shoot back up here, but we were actually aiming for this downtrend line. We were expecting it to go back all the way up to this downtrend line, okay, because it's overtaking the 50 MA. I'm like, okay, this is very bullish. It's going to hit this. It did not reach this, obviously. And after a couple of candles of just kind of bouncing around, as you could see, this is kind of like a flat top, and it's not really going anywhere. I decided, because of course I'm paper hands trader, though this is this is probably good enough for me. This was ticker specific news, but everything else is pointing bearish. Even the NTS indicator was, pointing bearish. I basically took a trade against the trend, which is obviously not something you want to do. I did it, of course, based on the fact that there was ticker specific news, but I figured that was profit enough. And somewhere around here, I believe I sold the calls for something like 20 something profit, 20% something profit. And it's a good thing that I did, because the very next day, I believe we had some market data come out, and that's why this, this pre-market big red candle right here drops back down to this support. It tries to basically just recover, but then the next day I believe we got more bad news, and it just kept on tanking and melting. This is actually when we took the second play. But on the second video, what we did was that we looked over the fact that I missed these two. Sorry, not that. We missed this level, which was quite an important level, which just happened to be where it hit resistance. It happened to be a resistance level, which is basically what limited our play. But we came out green, so that was good. And then the next day, we took another play after it broke. Actually, it would have been the next day. We took another play here, but this time it was puts. And I do believe I played that one on the app, and it's there. It should be there. And it did quite well. And then we airplayed the next one. I didn't put it on the app, and it kept on going even lower. Okay, and from here on out, it's just been bearish, bearish, bearish. There's no market, positive market news. There's no positive industry news for EVs. There's no positive news for NIO. So it's just kind of been melting down some more, and always bouncing off of this 50 SMA. So what we're looking at for next week is basically this is a very both of these are very long-term supports. So we're using the first one as our entry. If this bounces off of it and then starts heading back down, that'll be our entry for puts to this level, and even likely to this level. If it bounces above and holds this support, it'll probably be around the same time that this MA is reaching somewhere around here. So we will have the confluence of, okay, it overtook a long-term support, it's overtaking a short-term support, it's overtaking a downtrend line at the bottom of the channel, and it will probably be overtaking, and that would be the final signal to entry into the long, the 50 SMA. And that would be a place that we could run this all the way up to 13 and a half. Okay, so that was our play for NIO the past couple of weeks, and it will be our play for NIO for the next week coming up. The SunPower one, I didn't really look at it that much, so I'm not gonna. Oops, let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything on the daily. Okay, so again, we're at the bottom of this channel. There is more reason to expect a bullish move up now, especially after this, this week where it just basically melted. It's at very long-term support. It's at the bottom of the channel. It's near the 50 MA on the hourly, which could end up being positive. So let's expect. Let's wait for next week pre-market and see what happens. We will definitely be watching this one pre-market. Okay, and the SunPower, like I said, was just something that came out of the blue. But it was basically the same idea. Okay, actually, let me see. No, I don't think I have SunPower here. But it was the same idea except that we traded with the trend. Okay, the same idea as with NIO, except better, because we took, and here it is, we took this this play for puts. Obviously, the trend was down. Well, this is a short-term trend, but okay, here's the longer-term trend. It's still down, as you can see. the downward momentum has slowed and it's kind of chopping around and it's taking out some highs, like a lot of tickers are doing lately, but it's not making higher highs. I mean, well, it is making higher highs, but it still has quite a few swing highs before it. But in essence, it's still, on a downtrend from on the long term, weekly and monthly. And this one had an additional, this one did have a price pattern, which was the island, which is basically when you get a big gap up and then price moves into this area, but it's separated by a huge gap here, and then you get another gap down. We were actually waiting for that to form. There was sort of a small one here. It's kind of like two islands, see? So this is the island, and you could say that there was sort of a gap right here. All right, and then it might form again because of the downgrade. It had a downgrade. Unfortunately, it didn't. It had some time to actually kind of bounce around, and I guess it didn't go through that gap. It basically filled this one, but it didn't gap down all the way. Although you do see that it did end up quite lower, and that's the play that we took on SunPower. So the trend was with us. There was sort of a price pattern forming, but actually in the end it did not end up playing out. And there was that ticker-specific news was a downgrade from, I believe it was Bank of America or some other analyst. Okay, so the last one that I wanted to look at that we also played with this week was ENS. If you go on the weekly, ENS is like a lot of crypto. It bottomed out somewhere around here, and it's been trying to keep this uptrend going. It hasn't made lower lows, as you can clearly see. It's actually making higher lows, and it made quite a higher high here, and then it took out that higher high quite easily over here. So I've been looking at this one on, I can't remember if it was the daily or the hourly. I think it was the daily. Okay, so here it is. And it was kind of chopping around this level. Actually, I was sort of looking at some kind of a triangle formation here, but what happened, what got me interested in this was that it had quite a bit of relative strength compared to Bitcoin and other crypto, even Ether. This was doing a lot better. And what really caught my attention was when it took out this high. Okay, once it took out this high, then it really got me interested. And if we zoom in here, I was definitely looking at this on the 1 hour. Okay, so here is the chart. This is still the 1 hour, and remember, this is where it takes out this area here is where it takes out this high, which was that very interesting high from a little bit past September. And when it takes out that high, it does it quite solidly, actually. Big green candle right there. Okay, let me zoom in here more. Sorry, my computer's kind of slow. Right here, and it does so after taking back the 50 SMA and reacting off of it quite strongly, which was also confluence with this long-term support. Okay, so that's what caught my attention. It bounced and it just started chopping around, and even though it did drop again here, it did not reach this uptrend line from all the way down here. This uptrend line was also something that it had been reacting to quite nicely from way back. Okay, so you can see it bounce off of this uptrend line. It had quite the run up. Again, here it bounces off of this uptrend line. It has quite the run up, and then this time it doesn't even come back to this downtrend line. It just reacts onto this other level here, which is a newer uptrend line, which you can see forming here, and I started drawing this this pattern here, and it takes the SMA. Okay, it takes the SMA. So my attention is definitely caught at this point because there's a lot of buying going on at higher levels, and it's not even respecting this trend line, which it had been reacting off of quite nicely. And this is where I found myself. Let me zoom in. 1 hour is good enough. And this is where I decided that I wanted to take my play. Okay, I'm actually going to get rid of this level. That was very short-lived. It bounces once and it bounces twice off of this support, okay, which is a daily support. So when it does this after that huge bullish bounce off of the new uptrend line and overtaking the SMA and overtaking or taking out that swing high, now it does a double bounce off of this support, or double bottom, sorry, and it gets really bullish. So the minute that it takes out this high here, or sorry, I believe this was my entry. Yeah, so it was somewhere around 17.5, and then I wrote it to 18.5. Sorry, because I did two. I actually went in at around 17, wrote it to about 18, and then again I came in at 18 and I wrote it to like 19 and a half and then got out. And now this is where I find myself. Let me stretch this out so y'all can see better. Okay, again we get this huge run up. Okay, and I had just gotten out of the previous play. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I had just gotten out of that previous play, and it had this huge run up right here. Okay, and I decided this is going to be my new entry, which is also a support line. Okay, and this entry coincides with, let me see this. Oops, sorry. It's 19.5, which is that level, the support level that I had drawn in, and this was the entry, and I'm actually still in this play. Okay, and the way I'm playing it is that I'm expecting it. Obviously, I'm expecting it to shoot up to 21, but I've been staying in the play because there's been so much bullish momentum. There's no reason for it to really start tanking, and that 50 SMA is it's still working its magic as support. So there's no reason for me to get out of this trade right now. My stop loss is currently at this small base that it formed right here between this rally base rally. That's my support. That's my stop loss, sorry. And this sort of base that it was forming here was kind of like a flag. This is the one that I made my entry. I was expecting it to hold it. It didn't. It wicked. It didn't a little bit, but every time it failed to hold that, let me zoom in. Every time it failed to hold, it failed by quite a little. So as you see, this candle right here, I'm going to move out of that tool thing. So yeah. So it breaks past the 19.5 here, and it bounces back down to it. I was expecting it to bounce up, and that's why I took, sorry, that's not when I took the play. I took the play here because this is the first time that it actually closed above the 19.5. So it breaks above 19.5, but it doesn't hold. And then it moves a little bit lower, but it's not, you know, it's not, I'm not completely convinced. And then it moves down just a little bit more, but I'm thinking, okay, if it breaks above the 19.5 and hold, the minute that it breaks above and holds, I'll go in. And so it goes down just a little bit, and all of a sudden it breaks above, and then it actually holds. I didn't like the long wick on top, but this is the one that signaled for me to enter. I went in, and as you can see, came back down to that level. It held it quite nicely. It bounced up away from it, and I thought that was the run. And then it just kind of kept bouncing and holding. You see how it's just reacting to that 19.5 level. A lot of candle bodies, a lot of wicks, and then today, yep, Friday, it breaks down below, but it kind of bounces back up. Of course, it had some help from the general market bearish sentiment, but it hasn't reached my stop loss. So it's right here. It reaches an even lower level, but it just rockets back up, and now it's holding. I'm still not out because I still haven't reached my stop loss, but now it's looking a little bit better. So the weekend is sometimes a good time for crypto. So I'm hoping for this to still make the run over this weekend. I would be a little bit skittish of holding it if it goes into next week, because I'm really expecting next week to be quite bearish on equities before it makes its run up towards November, which it usually does according to seasonality. So I'm basically going to hold this, and I have a sell order somewhere up here. I was just remembering that I do not have one to the downside, but it's the weekend, so I'm a little bit more alert, and I'll probably keep a closer eye on this. It's the weekend, and I'll go to sleep later and whatnot, because that's the difference between equities and crypto, is that crypto never rests. So you have to be, a lot of very big moves happen, well, what is nighttime for us in America. But so I'm going to be keeping an eye on this just up to the beginning of next week. If it doesn't make the run, then I'll probably just pull out, because I don't believe that it's going to have a lot of momentum left going into next week to make that run. So that's my play for ENS. So I'm just basically giving you the rundown of what I do, how I define or determine support and resistance levels, how I define stop losses and targets, which is basically off of those very same support and resistance levels, and the way I draw those support and resistance levels, like we talked about. Oops, let me undo that. Okay, the way that I draw those support and resistance levels based off of swing points, based off of fibs, and based off of lines that have many touches. Okay, and then basically once I look at the trend, look at my support and resistance lines, try to find price patterns. I'll go ahead and draw, some. I'll go ahead and look at some indicators. Moving averages. Sometimes I'll look at the RSI and the MACD, but not so much. I do use this Neptune trading system, which is from one of our analysts over at X-Trades, and then I always, of course, look at the fundamentals. So it's two sides of the same coin that I try to put together and come up with a theory of what I think might happen. So like I said, this is going to be 3.4, where we looked at NIO, and we are thinking that it's still going to be bearish for next week. There is no ticker-specific catalyst to say otherwise, and the market is probably going to keep getting bearish, at least in the beginning, into the beginning of next week, until something else happens to the upside. That might be the earnings results coming up next week. That might change the market sentiment a little bit. And the other one that I'm going to be looking at for next week is, of course, the ENS long, which I expect to reach 21 sometime during the weekend. If not, I'll probably cut this out. So that is what I look at. Those two, basically those two areas, the technical and the fundamentals, is probably what most people look at when they're trading. And there were a couple of more points on my first introduction video to trading, which had to do more with position. Maybe I believe it was, yeah, like your position size and your risk management, and be careful not mixing stocks with options or long term with short term. Some of the more common pitfalls that people run into as new traders, because I obviously experienced them myself, and I still do. So I just wanted to, get this out there and share some of my ideas and what I do and how I do things. And if you guys have any comments, they would be greatly appreciated, because that is the reason why I'm doing this. This is like my trading journal. This is not something that I'm, trying to sell on anybody. And basically, I would very much appreciate any comments or suggestions on my trading journal. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.